Hello and welcome back to Festival Place Climate Resilience. This session is about how we can engage communities with environmental data, and we'll be discussing, some of those difficult topics like air pollution or noise levels that can impact health and well-being in the city. The environmental data can help us to make healthier choices in the way we move around our cities, but the way this information is communicated actually matters and impacts the way communities feel empowered and participatory in their own navigating of the city. So joining me is Chloe McFarlane. Welcome, Chloe. She is engagement lead at Tranquil City. Chloe, you are working as engagement lead and researcher, but you also have a background in geography and generally in engagement. I know prior to Tranquil City, you worked as an engagement consultant at Soundings, and you've worked a lot on youth engagement strategy and at various state regeneration projects. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for today. And I'm happy to present my slides as and when you're ready. Yeah, okay.
Wonderful. You want to share your slides? I will just remind the audience that we will take questions after Chloe's talk. Of course, you're welcome to put your comments in the chat. And then there's also over on the side a Q&A speech bubbles that you can pop your questions in as we come to the end of that. I am not seeing your slides yet, Chloe. Are you making your way with the PDF?
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
And yes, of course, don't forget there is an emoji button if you guys would like to share your love. Fantastic. Chloe, that looks good to me. I'll leave you to your talk and I'll be back after with the Q&A.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Christine. Well, welcome everyone to my presentation. As Christine just mentioned, my name is Chloe, and I'm an engagement lead at an environmental data collective called Tranquil City. And today, on behalf of the Climate Resilience Festival, I'm delighted to be speaking about the most effective approaches when collecting and communicating environmental quality data with and for communities. So first of all, I just wanted to give a little bit of structure to my presentation, in which will be divided into 3 parts. First of all, we'll be providing a little bit of context on Tranquil City, who we are, and our ambitious goals for the future. I'll be also sharing our perspective on climate resilience and the current situation with engaging communities. Part 2, I'll be exploring our approaches for engaging communities in environmental quality data. So the fun aspect of this presentation was that I developed 3 fictional characters or personas to explore the nuanced challenges communities face when interacting and grappling with environmental quality data. Last but not least, I'll be exploring the key takeaways for industry professionals to enact when involving communities in environmental quality data. So, who is Tranquil City? So, Tranquil City, we are a multidisciplinary environmental data collective which aims to make environmental quality information accessible to everyone, promoting healthier lifestyles, connection to nature, and sustainable city design. So for those of you who are not aware of what is environmental quality information, it relates to characteristics about the areas you live in. So this includes levels of air pollution, noise. It could even be information about the quality and access of green and open space in your locality. On that note, I want to move on to our vision. So in a nutshell, we believe that cities should be healthy, equitable, and nature-filled places to live, work, and spend time in. Finally, what is our overarching mission? So our primary goal is to deliver multidisciplinary environmental data so that we can build evidence-based initiatives that create social and environmental impact. Formally joining last year, the most beautiful aspect about our company is that we have diverse specialisms ranging from research and data modeling to app integration and public engagement. So this slide is an absolute testament to the diversity and the interdisciplinarity of our company. We comprise of sound acousticians, which Grant will come in later in the Q&A, to air quality consultants, environmental psychologists, and community engagement experts. And we all aspire to create better and healthier cities. Now, closing up this first part of the presentation, I just wanted to point our view on the climate resilience situation and community engagements. So there's 2 key things I wanted to point out. We believe that green space are fundamental in climate resilience. It's well known that high quality green spaces in cities have multifunctional benefits for both city dwellers and biodiversity. I'm sure everyone knows, but improvements to physical and mental health, improved air and noise quality, reduced flood risk to urban cooling during extreme heat events. But where we come in, we feel, and I don't know how many people resonate with this, the way in which environmental quality data is presented limits community involvement in climate resilience efforts. So at Tranquil City, from what we've seen, environmental data is often excessive, complex, and highly objective. And this often serves as a barrier to communities understanding and supporting local greening initiatives, which contribute towards climate resilience. So now I move on to the second part of my presentation, which is our approaches for engaging communities in environmental quality data. I don't know if you recall from the introduction, but I said that there's 3 fictional personas to explore the different experiences of understanding and using such data. So first of all, we're going to come in with Joaquin. So Joaquin is a social worker from Newham, and this is his story. I just want to find a peaceful space in the city to relax and escape the stresses of work, which is extremely frantic at the moment. So at Tranquil City, we've devised a solution which responds to Joaquin's concerns about the efficiency of navigating environmental quality data. In 2017, we came up with a bespoke tool called the Tranquil Pavement London. So this is Tranquil Pavement London. Essentially, it is a user-friendly, interactive, mobile-ready site which allows users to navigate environmentally tranquil spots in the city. So these spots are indicated by the green leaves. Now, if I just point your attention down to the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, our pavement condenses large amounts of complex data on noise and air pollution into simple visual representation. So on the map, the areas which are greener, for example, Hyde Park, Primrose Hill up in the top corner, those indicate areas of greatest tranquility where there is low amounts of noise and air pollution. In contrast, this compares to the white lines, which usually correlates with busy roads where tranquility is null or more or less void. To encourage user participation, our pavement combines crowdsourced objective data with subjective experiences of space. So if I just point you to the top right-hand corner of the screen, on Twitter, Instagram, or even Facebook, people can contribute videography to photos, audio, quotes about their tranquil spaces in London. And overall, this creates a rich visual map of London's most restorative spaces. So the Tranquil Pavement has been extremely successful, and the Lewisham Air Quality Schools event is a strong testament to this. Back in March 2018, we were asked by Lewisham Council to deliver a workshop for local air quality champions, nominated school pupils. We gave pupils aged 8 to 11 the task of finding a peaceful route from home to school and back using the Tranquil Pavement that I just described. Now, the students effortlessly breezed through this task, and for their age, they had a full grasp and understanding of what tranquility is and their daily experiences of it. This is actually a map that one of the kids completed at the conference. As you can see, clear understanding of the Tranquil Pavement, getting from school to home, using the most tranquil route, which avoids busy, polluted roads. And there's a post-it on the side giving a clear justification. I chose that route because it is less polluted. So that wraps up one story. Now I want to present to you another unique lens or challenge. Oh, yeah, I see the hearts. Thank you. Where was my trailer for? Yeah, so now I want to present to you a different story or lens looking at the challenges with environmental quality data. So I present to you Antonella, which is a young mum from Lambeth, and this is her story. I think that most of London is void of tranquility, and I find it difficult to explore and discover new spaces on my own. So at Tranquil City, in response to Antonella's concerns about isolation in exploring environmental quality data, we've come up with a solution known as the Tranquil Walk series. So ever since our inception in 2016, we've been regularly facilitating these walks, which enables people to understand the realities and experiences of tranquility in the city. Anyone and everyone's welcome, and it's a hotbed for new encounters, new connections. there's two primary objectives. So with our walks, we encourage discovery of gaps in our tranquil pavement map that I just pointed out. So it's kind of analogous to Pokemon Go if you play there, or Pokemon Ball. And also we facilitate these walks to challenge preconceptions of areas perceived to be busy, noisy, and polluted. So our success story, an event that we done for Jane's Walk London Festival, was a clear demonstration of how useful these walks are. We organised a free public walk around Peckham, Bournemouth and Elephant and Castle, exploring South East London's green, rich connections. We explored the findings of a recent evidence review we conducted for Natural England. So we were asked to explore the factors which enhance the use and attractiveness of diverse green space typologies, ranging from guerrilla gardens and allotments to big, small parks, linear corridors, and sidewalk verges. So as you can see, it was an extremely warm day and we got 30 people attend, pretty momentous for us. And an extremely diverse audience. So, we had professionals, urban planners to creative illustrators, nature conservation enthusiasts, PhD and master students, food security groups, and the curious local resident, just intrigued by the idea of our walk. So here's a few real testimonials just demonstrating success. So Jill was one of our participants, and I just wanted to focus your attention on the latter part of the testimonial. It was great to learn more about both your organisations and see a new way to connect between Peckham and Southwark. And then now I'll bring you to the second testimonial by Virginia, in which she said that, well, thank you for the great walk today, gave us a lot to think about and consider in our home areas. Not only that, but she said that it was nice to meet new people with whom she added to her own sign-up list for her own walking group. So there's a lot of fruitful connections from that community engagement methodology. So on that note, I'm going to bring you to the final concluding story. So Flora's perspective. Flora is a volunteer at a local community garden in Newham, and this is her story. We're doing so much in our community to bring nature into deprived areas. We don't have the time or resources to celebrate or share this. No one really knows of our existence. So at Tranquil City, we've developed a solution which responds to Flora's concerns about the visibility of community efforts in, achieving climate resilience. And we've recently launched something called our Tranquil Story Series. So this will actually need to refer to my notes to get this right. So Tranquil Stories, in our campaign, we aim to tell inspirational stories of people and communities who share our vision for every person to have access to environments which support healthy, balanced and environmentally aware lives in cities. Throwing my notes away. So the best thing about this community engagement methodology is that we provide rich ethnographic accounts of how people are creating grassroots tranquil spaces, how they're being used, their benefits to the immediate neighbourhood, and also imminent threats to their protection, for example, commercial redevelopment, which is a common phenomenon in London. So I pointed out we started our Tranquil Story series earlier this year, so it's a bit hard to quantify success, but I can tell you one successful, actually kind of going back on me, but I really enjoyed delivering the Manor Park Community Garden interview. So we did this a few weeks ago, and we've actually officially released this on our website today. So we hosted this with one of the trustees, and in our interview, we celebrated the multifunctional uses of the recently generated space. So as you can see in the image, well, maybe not see, but it formerly used to be a garage space, and now it hosts a plethora of uses, from the gardening and cooking of numerous herbs, fruits and vegetables, to yoga sessions, toddler play classes, and school trips. The unique thing about our interview format is that it also provides a safe space for volunteers to vocalize their challenges. For example, in this instance, obtaining funding from Newham Council's Section 106 commitments was a task. And also, with a small team, one challenge was managing diverse community uses on such a small site. So as I said, we provide rich ethnographic accounts of what's happening, and we're very attentive to the very precious and ephemeral moments in the garden space. Examples of people cooking and sharing recipes. The trustee said that this has gained a lot of traction in a space in East London. So now I'll move on to the final part of my presentation, which are 3 key takeaways for industry professionals to enact to involve communities in environmental quality data. So I recommend, as number 1, I recommend giving people a voice to create change in their local area. Even small impacts can be big when done collectively. Tip number 2, I would advocate exploring reality and experience of tranquility with others, combining in-person events with technology. Now, as Christine mentioned in the introduction, I graduated from like the Bartlett, UCL Bartlett, and I advocate for like rich interdisciplinary mixed methods to, bring people closer to environmental quality data. Last but not least, tell a story to bring the data alive. And from our experience, it adds a strong element of relation and connection and context to data. So more people are likely to be involved and enticed into contributing. So on that note, those 3 tips. I want to say a massive thank you everyone for listening. Contact details are there, and I want to hand over to Christine, an audience for Q&As. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe.
No worries.
I'm really enjoyed that. I wanted to pick up right away as I'm waiting for some of those questions to come in. One thing that really strikes me is, we've had some questions already this morning about the 20-minute city and, this idea that communities have become very upset about any ideas that seek to limit transport options or, limit their ability to drive in certain neighborhoods, which is, of course, linked to air pollution. What strikes me is that you're talking a lot about this shift, not from what the limitations are, but this kind of enabling the public to discuss tranquility. And we're not talking about, limiting, we're talking about choice or freedom. Is that a deliberate shift? And would that be something that, you would say makes it a change to that kind of negative perception of low traffic zones, et cetera, which are also air pollution initiatives?
Oh, that was a big question. I'm thinking, where do I start? Okay, Christine, did you mention the first aspect? So obviously I call that you mentioned 50 minutes and 20-minute cities. And yeah, you go ahead.
I guess this idea of, you're talking about tranquility, but you're not saying you need to drive less or you need to walk more. And I think often the way that we've talked to communities about air pollution is in this way of presenting what we want them to stop doing or how we want them to change their behavior. Is that, from your experience with engagement, is that another problematic way that we speak to communities about air pollution?
So I definitely think that's maybe an issue when you start segmenting people into like, oh, well, you're a driver or you're a walker, etc. You point out like in our methodologies, we embrace anyone and everyone, and all we encourage is like hyper-local exploration of your areas, and we also welcome guests to come. Like for one of our walks, we held it in Barking and Dagenham, so geographically that's pretty far, but as I said, we don't discriminate against anyone. It's ultimately an opportunity to facilitate new connections. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, we don't see those dichotomies, if that makes sense. And ultimately, it's a moment our walks are just more, to raise awareness of the climate resilience situation, and it's more education in that sense. So yeah, I don't know if that does answer, but yeah.
It does, though. I think it kind of does speak to what you're saying. I mean, you are about enabling and about kind of positive engagement. And do you think that environmental data is, you talk about it being inaccessible, is partially, there doesn't seem to be a lot of fear in the way that you communicate it. When you're communicating those maps, they're very soothing, like this idea of the kind of green and the white. I'm used to looking at air pollution maps that have huge red, angry color systems and etc. Do you think fear is a sentiment you want to avoid when you're engaging in the conversation?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think fear definitely is one thing you want to avoid, because the whole idea, I guess, with our work is to kind of desensitize those contentious issues, and just create a safe space for anyone to vocalize their concerns and for others to understand the nuanced, perspectives and realities of engaging with environmental quality information. I'm wondering, Grant, is there anything you wanted to mention on like the visual aesthetics of the pavement? Because more like the technical side as well.
Yes, we're going to invite Grant to the stage. I neglected to say that. We have Grant Waters, who's CEO of Tranquil City, here as well to field questions. So Grant, welcome to the stage. But yes, do you want to pick up on the way that visual information is communicated? And of course, you work with data related to acoustics as well as air pollution. Do you think that it's problematic the way that often this data is communicated?
Yeah, it is problematic if we're using it for the purpose of promoting positive behaviour change. The way that the environmental data is usually created is for risk management, so it's looking at risk assessment. So how many people are exposed to these levels of pollution? So inherently, the representation will be done using a warning system. So it will be, like you said, a red map that highlights where it's worse. But what we're trying to do is flip it on its head and say, well, if we're trying to engage with new ways of dealing with that data and digesting it with the aim of it promoting positive behavior change, we're trying to flip it on its head and focus on the positive. So I think we're fundamentally changing the way you would look at environmental data and use it. So I think it's expected that it will be used as a risky risk assessment map, but we're just using it for a different purpose.
So I'm reading through the questions here to look through them, but we've got one from Joseph Baines about whether there are great examples to help prepare socially deprived areas for climate change and staying active, where people can stay active in declining green spaces. So do you see the decline in green spaces as an issue in areas of social deprivation through your work?
Should I go, Grant, or I take that? I think decline in areas of social deprivation. I think definitely decline is like one issue, but also access commonly in areas of deprivation. I'm just thinking back to our walks, like we've also held in areas like Thamesmead, and like there's such diverse typologies, so guerrilla gardens, or their space is constrained, and like there may be like lack of funding, etc. So I think there's like a lot of different like things to consider in areas of deprivation. So yeah. Again,
if I could add to that as well, because I think it's a really interesting question that we've been grappling with around the balance between green gentrification and improving areas in socially deprived areas. So for example, if you're seeing that you're increasing green, potentially that's going to raise house prices, and that's an issue in terms of displacing people when the area is improved. So there's got to be some answer in terms of how we can approach greening in a more equitable way that doesn't just displace people from their areas. So how can they be involved with greening an area if they know that they should be able to stay there and make it their home for a long period of time? So I think that's a question that we do come up against quite a lot. I think engaging people with this idea that green or low traffic neighborhoods doesn't necessarily mean displacement, doesn't mean that it's going to change negatively their experience of an area, is really important to say. Actually, the common ground is that we all want healthier, cleaner, greener places to live and work and spend time in. So how can we get that is at the forefront of the conversation, as opposed to it being about you're changing my lifestyle and that's a problem? It's hopefully a longer term vision that it can be a better place for everyone.
There is a question about whether you've seen or heard any conspiracy theories when you've been engaging with the public about it. I mean, there has been a lot in the media about conspiracy theories around 15-minute cities, but is that something, have you, are there people who, have you had to deal with that directly with the public?
Reflecting on my experience with the walks, I've never encountered any conspiracy theories. Like, mostly people come just to have a good time. It's a very positive vibes. And, as I said, it's the connections which people really relish from. So yeah, I've never experienced contestation of that nature. Maybe I shouldn't speak too soon, touch wood.
Yeah.
But we have had experience with them. Sorry, we have had experience.
Go ahead,
with
please.
That issue of, I don't necessarily call them conspiracy theories, and I think this is something that we're really trying to address in some of the projects that Chloe's leading on, which is, it's not just conspiracy theories that are against 20-minute neighborhoods or some of these low traffic neighborhood planning proposals. It's also to do with genuine concerns about how they've been implemented and where they've been implemented. What are the actual effects of displacement traffic that are from these? How do people may have genuine concerns that has affected their own perception, even if it's a perceived change? Why is that? So how do you start to address that? So I would say it's less about conspiracy theories, but it's about treating and listening to some people's concerns about them without this eye of saying they're wrong and they're just trying to get them off the table. But ultimately it's a communication problem. How are these communicated to show that they're going to benefit these people, and how do you get them on board? If they're not on board, then you haven't done your engagement properly. And this is a challenge we would put back and say, you need to talk about this and listen to those concerns. And this is one project that we're trying to challenge this idea through citizen science monitoring in Lambeth. Following Chloe's master's research, we've created a project that's exploring that for people who are concerned about them. So I would say the first point would be to maybe listen to what they're concerned about and see if it has got roots in either fear or if it's based on lack of transparency of data.
And lack of trust, because I think when you're talking about things like green gentrification, for people not familiar with the term, that's when green improvements to an area raise property values and are seen as a move to kind of move impoverished communities out. But often, like as you're saying, these are even well-meaning projects that are implemented in a way in which people feel like they're maybe not for them. They don't feel a sense of connection or belonging to the initiative that's taking place on their doorstep. So they can have a sense of alienation or lack of empowerment or engagement. So I think that lack of trust might be something that you've experienced in the past. I mean, Chloe, you've done youth engagement, and that's kind of traditionally seen as both, it can be easy with extremely young children, but can be extremely challenging as well. So do you have suggestions for building trust through engagement? Are there kind of do's and don'ts?
I think in terms of building trust through engagement, I would say it's fundamental to build rapport with people. So not just go to them once, but continuously, and breaks down a lot of barriers. Second part of your question, or was it just one?
I think it was just one. I mean, yeah, about trust and breaking down. Well, I asked you a little bit about youth engagement. Does that differ widely? Does that widely differ from what you would do with kind of, I don't know, a mixed group or etc.? You have particular experience there, and it's seen as in some ways can be a more difficult demographic in terms of young people, young adults, as opposed to children.
Mm-hmm. So with young people, so as I said to you before, our walks are open to anyone and everyone. I've always struggled with that demographic, and just reflecting upon my past experience at Soundings, I would advocate addressing going to schools or going to them on behalf of something extracurricular or on behalf of their own time. Also dissemination like technology, because that appeals to that audience as well. But yeah, no, we're still trying to work out the best strategies for engaging young people, because as elucidated on earlier with the Tranquil Pavement, have a clear understanding of tranquility and environmental quality data, and it's just about finding the right platforms to vocalize their views and opinions, and getting them to attend the actual events. So yeah, in terms of my tip, I would advise going to them as opposed to waiting for them to come to us.
There's a question here from April Cho from Turner and Townsend. Beyond the internal initiatives that you've shared, does Tranquil City connect community members to projects that may impact them? So bridging the gap between policy development and community representation. No, Grant, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. That was the original intention of the Tranquil Pavement as well. So it's to help try and provide an intermediary in terms of people's perceptions of tranquility and how they can go and find it if they don't know how to find it and where to go. So now we've been conducting some research. We've done some of it in Natural England and DEFRA recently, where we're looking at identifying some of the issues around accessibility and also how some of the environmental benefits of green infrastructure. So a lot of that was about how do you try and break down the barriers to use and enjoyment of green spaces in cities. So yeah, we try and do that through our work. It's kind of the common theme that we're trying to encourage both people, but also planners and policymakers to really value these spaces and to experience them on a regular basis.
There's a question here from Megan Bhattacharya from Placemaking London, who wants to know whether you have any suggestions about engaging the business community, specifically bids. So these are groups of like retailers on a road. Do you have ideas about how you might help them reduce air pollution collectively, or is that something you're looking at?
Ooh, Grant, I think you might be more positioned because I'm more towards like community, but like the bid angle, you might be better equipped.
We have worked with bids before. We've worked with Better Bankside and Team on the Bridge. That'd be great ways to provide sort of more smaller scale but more rapid implementations. So we in our early stages, we work with them to sort of explore ideas around how to promote tranquility and green infrastructure in their areas. So yeah, I think they're a good way in between sort of more policy planners and local authorities and the public, because they're and businesses, because there's a lot of benefits that businesses can actually get from having more tranquil environments in their areas. So what we have done with some businesses like Selfridges is do specialist walks around their area, where we can try and find tranquility and encourage their staff to go on walking meetings, and have a map where they can easily sort of access and know about nearby spaces, easily commutes to walk from the station as opposed to getting other forms of transport in between. And just generally those methods of saying, actually, thinking about these things is really good for your business. And that's a way we would like to explore a bit more with BIDS, because you know, clean air routes or tranquil routes or other information that businesses can find that can be an advantage to bring, you know, the best talent to the area is, I think, a real unique selling point, which we see is growing year on year.
Grant, I want to ask you just, you know, for the benefit of the audience, really, because I think air pollution is perhaps more familiar to them as a concept. But of course, you're talking about health and well-being related to acoustics, and maybe you have some kind of top line reasons why they need to care about the acoustic environment of our places.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for asking that. Noise is kind of coming up on the agenda behind air pollution. They always say that, even though air quality is actually a smaller industry. But I mean, in terms of sound and noise, we generally starting to emerge as soundscape, and it's talking about the quality of our sound environments and how that can affect well-being. There's obviously it's not the physical necessary effects of like you have air pollution. It's actually the more psychological effects that noise can have. And I think a lot of people, probably most people in this call and anyone you talk to, will have had issues with noise in some shape or form. And I think that is the attitude towards it and the subjective nature of it is so important to consider, that it's really important from a design perspective too. Now, sound is quite hard to design for because acousticians like myself aren't necessarily designing the spaces that affect the sound in the way that, so in the urban environments. but it's landscape architects and urban planners that can, and transport engineers even, can have a big influence on the sound environment. So for example, if you're starting to think about what can encourage walking and cycling, noise is a very big influence on that. So for example, if you're not going to walk down the street and you can't have a conversation with your friend because it's too loud. So trying to design spaces that you can have one-to-one conversations comfortably and have social interactions at a comfortable level is really important. And also in terms of green spaces too, having a noisy area in a green space actually reduces the amount of people who are likely to visit and spend time there. So it's important to consider when looking at greenery for both people and also nature, because it can also, a noisy area can reduce bird populations and insects in that area too. So starting to think about sound when you're looking at greenification of cities is really important, because it can promote healthy activities, healthier choices, because it's a nicer, more pleasant place to be in.
I think it's interesting to know that, I mean, if somebody has asked a question about the kind of invisibility of this environmental data, you can't necessarily detect air pollution. You can't necessarily, I mean, you should be able to hear the soundscape, but again, we become very easily accustomed, or we think it doesn't affect us in a way, as you said, it's a psychological impact. It's not one that you might pick up on. It's just as a kind of a low level stress or an undetected level of stress that you may not be associating with the noise level of your surrounding areas. John Murray from Sustrans has asked why you focused your efforts on ordinary communication. I'm taking that to mean like communicating with the public, as opposed to kind of the use of high-tech tools or kind of communicating with a professional audience.
Ooh, I don't know if I should dive in here. And you know what? It takes a long time to process these questions and scalpel.
Hey, don't worry about it. I think that's one for, I mean, in a way, oh, John actually just is raising his hand, so I'm going to invite him to put your question. Would you like to put your question in the audio format, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just meant you're doing community walks and you're sharing your data and some complex data that way, but you're just chatting with people. And as a engagement professional worker, whatever, I find there's a growing number of funky tools that are out there for people to use. And I just wondered what you felt the value of just chatting to people and experiencing that kind of very ordinary interaction rather than having some other method that intervenes. You understand what I'm trying to... So I said I put just chatting, because that's what you seem to be doing, which...
So from my experience, like our walks, for example, carry so many potentialities and trajectories. Like I think when people are collectively in one space and they realize that there's a commonality, this format's changed. There's commonality in terms of climate resilience being like an issue. It rallies people to collectively make change. I don't know if they're answering your response. Again, I need to work.
No, but I think it kind of gets at the heart. I understand your point, John, but it kind of gets at the heart of the whole purpose is that there are all of these funky tools, but they kind of demand that the public go and figure them out and stare at them and engage with that data. And there is a power to just chatting and making that, putting that within there. Grant, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it's a really, thanks for your question, John. I think it's an interesting point to discuss. I mean, our approach doesn't just look at this type of engagement. We do, for example, app integrations to provide walking routes from A to B. We collaborate with Go Jauntly, a walking app that can enable people with automated routes to find the greenest, most tranquil route. So we do this all from our data side of things, but this is kind of like focusing, Chloe's talk's been focusing on how we communicate that to the public and have those connections. I think the main thing I would really sort of answer your question is that I think we need lots of different approaches to engage with as many people as we can. because some people might like a conversation that could get really, get a lot out of coming on a walk with a group of people. Some people might want to do it by themselves or with their family without sort of being guided along. Some people want to just access a data map and explore the data and like that sort of thing. And the premise of Tranquil City isn't about saying our solution is, two things. Our solution is actually integrating into the premise of considering environment in kind of all the things that we do. So, for example, we integrate our data into apps, we integrate it into looking at research, we integrate it into looking at how local authorities can target their green infrastructure plans. It's all about infiltrating and giving people the data that they can make informed decision on, but considering environmental quality as a key aspect. So I think I completely agree with your challenge about it's just a conversation with people, because our approach is trying to look at a multitude of ways to engage with people with this data, because one solution won't fit everything.
John, you're on mute if you wanted to come back. There we go.
Yeah, more a celebration than a challenge.
Well, thank you very much for your question, John. It's very rare for people to raise their actual hand at these events, but you can tell other people how you did it. You can always put up your hand to ask a question if you would prefer to chat instead of type. Thanks very much for that, John. In terms of, I think there are a few questions that are kind of looking at this idea of social areas of social deprivation. I mean, have you targeted your maps? I mean, is that are you intersecting? Is there an intersection between areas of higher sound issues and air pollution issues and areas of social deprivation? And is that something that you're particularly targeting when you're looking at, for example, putting on free walks or other engagement activities?
So like with our walks, we, as I said, we do everywhere in London, and particularly focus on areas of deprivation where access to green space is limited or the quality is lower. So yeah, we encourage like people to go on our walks to discover the unconventional types of green space. For example, we wilded, pavement sides or green alleyways. So for those areas, there's a greater need to have more awareness of those unconventional typologies. Is there anything else you want?
Yeah,
no, that's great.
We're starting to integrate that into our strategies, in the sense that, for example, from early on with the Tranquil pavement, we used it as a way to figure out where our next walks would be. So our next walks would be an area where there's nothing. So it was like, well, there's an area that no one thinks is tranquil. Okay, let's go and do a tranquil walk in that area. And then we explored it, and then we encourage others to explore it. And now we're rooting that into, sort of integrating that approach into our work, where we're looking at social deprivation indices in relation to population densities, green infrastructure quality. So we're using our Tranquil City Index and using that to pinpoint where there's potential opportunities that they should be, had investment in. So we're using that as a strategic tool. So this is where environmental data can get quite interesting, because there's obviously lots of studies, to answer your question, Christine, about saying that there's in more deprived areas, they're more exposed to high levels of noise and air pollution. That's true. That's an equity fact that we need to try and address. So we're trying to look at that and say, well, actually, data can quite easily help you to identify where you should focus on. And we're now working on a project at Innovate UK to explore how that data can be used to pinpoint where green infrastructure improvement should be made, and also where community groups should focus on to be better at, or to get more funding, essentially. Because if a small community group that's creating community gardens, they struggle to get funding, or if they actually went, here's our methodology, here's how we can pinpoint that this area is actually best, then perhaps they're more successful in funding, which hopefully helps community green projects flourish more. So that's one thing we're currently doing.
And just
a really important point.
To drill down, that Tranquil map is partially crowdsourced and partially empirical data. In terms of that crowdsourced element, how do you encourage people to participate in that? Is that something that you're kind of pushing all of the time? And is that when you talk about empowering raising the profile of people who are creating green spaces? Is that an opportunity for people with growing spaces and et cetera to put themselves on your map? That's kind of a two-part question, but
yeah, Chloe asked me this before because you were anticipating this question. So Tranquil Pavement is quite one of the first things we did, and it's coming into its end of its life. The issue is because the way we did it was hashtag Tranquil City London, so using social media hashtags. Again, the idea that people won't have one way to contribute these spaces; they'll do it in their normal activities. And now, because of Instagram being bought by Facebook a few years ago, the privacy stuff has all changed completely. So the pulling of that data is limited. And this is where we're now starting to refresh how we do that map. And this is where the Tranquil stories and all these other things are kind of accumulating into a way that we can actually really start to revise that map next year, in which we can bring lots of different, more empirical data behind it and use a bit more functionality that people can showcase their projects and sort of look at the impact they're having. For example, how many people have access to that community green space in your local area? What benefits does it provide them from health, well-being point of view, biodiversity point of view? And we're trying to integrate that into the platform. But generally, the campaign was about trying to just get people to explore. And we very much want to still encourage that, because it's sort of the way that we started to experience this ourselves is the reason why we created it. That more and more people were saying, oh yeah, I want that sort of tool to be able to find these tranquil spots. I need that. And we're like, yeah, so do we. So it's just about sharing. But yeah, we are hoping next year to launch a bit more of a newer version of it in some form that can enable some of that impact measurement.
why do you see that crowdsourced element as so important, as opposed to just putting out empirical data?
Because tranquility is subjective, and we believe that that's an important point of any kind of environmental quality metric, is that it's subjective. There's an interesting fact that we found out this year with noise is actually, if you're experiencing a certain level of road traffic noise and you're looking at a concrete wall, if you're looking at a green wall, it would actually be perceived to be 10 dB lower than if you're looking at that concrete wall. So our perception and the sort of holistic environment changes the way we perceive environmental quality. And in that evidence base sort of suggests that we need to treat things and learn how to adopt methodologies that allow things to be subjective, not just objective. So we're trying to combine those because we've realized the value in subjectivity. But we need to create processes to enable that to be designed against, to be encouraged for exploration, challenged, but also hopefully enjoyed at a greater scale because of it.
Does that subjectivity translate to greater resilience? If you're looking at that green space, are you likely to have a less of a psychological impact? Is that
yeah, so it can perceived audios or perceived noise level does change the actual, can mediate the risks from a psychological point of view and health point of view. So yeah, it's all noise is as perceived. It's as we perceive it. If you don't care about this noise that someone else finds is really irritating, the person who's irritated will have the negative reaction and the cortisol levels will increase and blah, blah, blah. So it is about how we perceive, as much as the same as one neighbor might be annoying, but the other one's not. Even the one you don't find annoying is having a louder level of noise than the other one. Why is that? It's because we have attitudes towards certain types of noise. It's the same with other environmental qualities, maybe less so air pollution. But if we understand it to be a problem, that can cause anxiety levels changing. So we do believe that subjectivity is a really big thing, and this is why we're combining lots of different approaches and trying to find a method that fits to make sure we can robustly incorporate subjectivity into the conversation.
Super interesting. I mean, that's the end of our session. So that just leaves me to thank you, Chloe and Grant. If we can have a round of emoji applause for Tranquil City, bringing us some interesting food for thought and connection. I know Claire Daly in the comments has talked about the importance of noise when she visited Freiburg in Germany and was listening to the birds singing and the kids playing. All like a little bit more tranquility in our urban lives, I think. So thank you both for sharing. Oh, and Freiburg. We all need a bit more Freiburg.
I was just going to say I posted a link to the website in the comments section, and in our blog post section you'll see like the new Tranquil Stories series for anyone who's interested. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we will be back in just 8 minutes time with a session on urban canyons and how the geography of our high streets can change our experience of the temperatures and our comfort on the ground, and how we can make those spaces more climate resilient. So join me for that. In the meantime, thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, everyone.